Today we are going over the 7 most broken commanders and their decks.
I'm Mia, and we're traveling to Phoenix soon.
I'm BZ. Unfortunately, I just started playing Balatro, and I love it. We're the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by Card Kingdom. I play Balatro, that's got cards, but if you want better cards that are real, Magic the Gathering has them, and you should buy them from Card Kingdom because you're going to get all of your cards in the same package with free shipping on orders $50 or more, and they're going to arrive in a time period where they're going to arrive this decade.
They have foils, they have non-foils, they have doubles, singles, triples, quadruples, anything that you need, they will have, plus accessories. So go to Card Kingdom, tell them we sent you, because our link is in the description and it will help the show. We're also sponsored by Dragon Shield, best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
If you use the code
NERDS
at checkout, you can save 5% of your Real My Tax dollars on your entire order, which includes custom sleeves. That is awesome Dragon Shield quality with any image that you can put on your sleeves.
And we're sponsored by Moxield. But not right now. We're going to wait until the middle of the video and then totally catch you by surprise, and you will never be able to predict when it is because that's just how dynamic we are. And we have a Patreon. If you are new to the show, you can get some brand new tiers, and you can get your decks on this YouTube channel, and you can get some exclusive merch.
Connect with us and check out so much more on Patreon. But today we are going to be talking about the 7 most broken commanders. What do we mean by broken, though? The way we define broken is commanders that are very powerful, but in part due to an apparent design mistake or oversight. There have been some admissions from the WotC team about design mistakes prior, and then there are some which just have such glaring flaws that they make them so powerful.
Right, yeah, there are definitely a few where I can read between the lines here, and I can know that, like, this card probably wasn't designed to do X, Y, Z, especially when it says ABC on it also, and it just doesn't happen to matter. I think we're definitely leaning into the general, video game, board game sort of level of broken, where it's like, it doesn't literally break Magic the Gathering, but this card doesn't work as intended.
The first one that we're going to talk about is the one that is probably on everyone's minds right now. It's Yuriko, the Tiger Shadow. 1 blue-black for a 1/3, but you're never going to be playing that because you're going to be paying blue-black instead because it has Commander Ninjutsu, never taxed. Whenever a ninja you control deals combat damage to a player, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. Each opponent loses life equal to that card's mana value. The mistake here is that Commander Ninjutsu is not taxed, so you can keep bringing her out for just that blue-black cost and never pay commander tax.
Yeah, I don't think that was the intent either. I mean, this is a confirmed design mistake from some of the people who worked on it. I want to say we have no ill will towards any of that, but we're just categorizing some of the commanders that have been broken in the past, and we're just putting them in a list. So I have nothing to say to anyone who made these cards. I think they're doing a great job overall. But Yuriko, confirmed mistake because Commander Ninjutsu, I don't think is the problem. Like, the fact that you can ninja a commander from the command zone onto the battlefield, it's kind of cool. It kind of overrides that weird step where, like, most ninjas don't do that from the command zone, so why would you ever play them? But the only problem is that, yeah, like you said, it wasn't taxed. So forever, they can always just pay blue-black and just put it out from the command zone, and it means that now every single unblocked creature, if Yuriko's not in play, basically just represents Yuriko.
It's just crazy because of all the attack triggers. You can snipe in with such little creatures, and then you have to be using that removal early, or else they are just going to get the advantage because of that Commander Ninjutsu, because it's so cheap.
Yeah, the fact that it's just blue-black, I think warps the entire game around Yuriko, where, like, you can't let the little guys, like Slitherblade, blue for a 1/2, can't be blocked. You can't let Slitherblade through if Yuriko's not in play, but if Yuriko is in play, you can't kill Yuriko, because then if there's another little Slitherblade dork, they'll just go whoop, 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 ninjutsu. That's the ninjutsu sound.
See, I think it's so interesting. The first time I ever saw Yuriko, my friend was playing it, and my other friend used Swords to Plowshares on, like, a Slitherblade or, like, a Fairy Seer or some little dork that was gonna hit turn 2 and then immediately bring out Yuriko. I didn't understand because I was like, why are you using such a powerful, efficient removal spell on such a little thing? But that is their game plan. They want to be putting out all these little guys so that they can swing in later for this giant amounts of damage with Yuriko out on the field.
Yeah, it breaks the rule of thumb of, like, oh, you're supposed to hit the commander. It's like, not when it just always is in play, which is obviously not the design intent of Yuriko. So another one you're going to see is probably Moth Dust Changeling. It's blue for a 1/1, and if you tap an untapped creature you have, it gains flying. Yuriko will play any and every 1-mana 1/1 can't be blocked / has flying / some other evasion I didn't mention that I couldn't think of here. And then they're just going to overwhelm you with them, and it's going to lead to 1 drop on turn 1, Yuriko on turn 2, trigger, because there is more words on Yuriko, even though Commander Ninjutsu ended up being broken the way it's printed. It also just nugs you for damage based on the top card of your library.
Mothdra's Changeling is also an interesting one because it counts as a ninja towards Yuriko's ninjutsu or ninja count, let's say. So if you are playing it later in the game, it can chip in for that ninja damage where you can get extra triggers off of her. And if you play it in the beginning, you're just going to be swapping it out with Yuriko and then just being able to hit for that first piece of like little Yuriko damage.
Another absolute banger in the push-through damage category is Tetsuko Umezawa Fugitive. It's 1 and a blue for a 1/3, and creatures you control with power or toughness 1 or less can't be blocked. That's Yuriko. So even by itself, this creates a Yuriko trigger every single turn, and that trigger is going to be a ninja, so it reveals top card and they lose a bunch of life.
Ninjas are just so powerful within themselves because with ninjutsu, they just have to not be declared as blocked. It can't just be like, oh, later, well, now that you have something bigger out, I can block it. Like, no, it was already declared. It's going to be hitting you. It's going to be dealing that combat damage, and you're going to be getting the triggers both off it and then whatever it has coming with it, which might be something even bigger.
Yeah, we keep alluding to that, and we'll get to some of the bangers that you put on top of your deck first, but I think you want to stack the deck so that even with 1 or 2 Yuriko triggers, you could get 5, but even with 1 or 2, you want to hit for big damage. So we're going to use Vampire Tutor. Black for an instant, search your library for a card and put it on top. And I guess you lose 2 life, but do you really?
Vampiric Tutor is one of those cards where it's such a good card in every deck, basically, because it's always great to find the best card in your deck. But it's so good here, too, because stacking the top is so relevant to those Yuriko flips later. Like putting Dig Through Time through your deck. 6 blue for an instant with Delve. Look at the top 7 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Yuriko only cares about the mana value of the spell. So if you can get big spells and reduce them or only pay part of the spell's mana cost, that will still count for that gigantic amount of damage for your opponents, while also still giving you a playable spell that's not just a brick in your deck, like Draco used to be for Yuriko.
Yeah, like Draco is 16 mana and basically has no text in any universe in this deck, but you kind of can just like get rid of all that stuff because we have so many cards like Dig Through Time, there's Treasure Cruise, they cost 8, but then when you actually go to cast them, it's like, not really. I don't know if this deck wants to mess with affinity too much, but there's other cards too that just say, hey, I'm not 15, I'm actually like 3. And those cards are semi-playable to very good, like Dig Through Time is, and it just means that they don't really have to pay too much of a cost for that big mana setup.
Yuriko players love the split cards too, like the Connive Concocts of the world.
Yeah, because it costs 9.
Yeah, because it all totals up all of that mana value together, but you can only pay half if you really want to, so you get the flexibility of that while also getting the big damage later.
Yeah, that makes me think of the other one, Shadow of Mortality, 13 black, 7/7. If your life total is less than your starting life total, it costs X less, where X is the difference. So if you're in the middle of the game, if you're at 23 life, this costs 17 less, which means it's a 2 mana 7/7. Now that's not breaking the game. It's not even great, but we look at Draco, uncastable, trash, basically a whiff. This is a 2 mana 7/7. It's like a hunted horror that doesn't give away anything else, and it deals 15 damage to people.
That is so nasty, and being able to replace a full brick with something that's actually playable late in the game was such an upgrade for this deck when this came out. There's also Fierce Guardianship, 2 and a blue for an instant. If you control a commander, you can cast it without paying its mana cost. Counter target non-creature spell. Yes, this is a great one because we all love to play commander and because it's always great to have your commander out, but being able to ninjutsu your commander out for so cheaply means that Yuriko is always going to be out, or you can always like bring it back, bring it out when it gets targeted, so it's always going to be a pretty free counterspell.
Yeah, it's really hard to keep Yuriko off the field, and I think it's one of the rare commanders that you're supposed to keep on the field. So this is always going to be turned on. Your Fierce Guardianships and your Deadly Relics not only give you a little bit of value because they cost more than what you pay, so it feels like you're gaining something in the reveal the top card of my library front, but also Yuriko's just never not going to be in play, even if your opponents are actively targeting you, because it just needs to stay there.
It just is so tough to get out because they could just zip it back and forth, and it turns out, oh, you actually did nothing. You got rid of maybe a 1/1 at best.
Yeah, I think the absolute best way to keep Yuriko on the field, but not really, is with like Kenra's Transformation or Darksteel Mutation or something. That could just ruin the entire Yuriko player's whole life, because blue and black are not super great at answering enchantments. If they can sacrifice it, that's good for them, but that's a cool way. Now, next is a card that I know you play a lot. So let's hear what this is and why it's a mistake.
This is Vile Smasher the Fierce, 1 black-red for a 2/3. Whenever you cast your first spell each turn, you choose an opponent at random. It deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to that player or planeswalker that player controls, and it has partner. Vile Smasher is just the face of this category that we're going to be talking about. The mistake here is 2-color partners. This has also been a design mistake admitted by Wizards.
Yes, so the interesting thing about this is that I think 2-color partners could have worked, but not in any way that's interesting to anyone. So I think they would improve upon the partner mechanic later, the idea of having 2 commanders, by making them 1 color, but giving you access to twice as much color identity or twice as much of whatever means that the commanders themselves need to do very little. I think if you have 2 commanders, they should probably be about as strong as half a card each. Otherwise, why would you play anything else? If I get to just play 2 fully powered, ridiculous magic cards in my command zone, why would I not do that? Especially when I can get 4 color identity a lot of the time. And I think 2-color partners could work if the commanders were like vanilla creatures, but that's not interesting to anybody.
Yeah, I think that with the original 2-color partner cycle, they were very good on their own, whether you threw them in the 99 or as partner. So that made very, I guess, not interesting combos because they were just so generically good. Like we've all heard of Timna Thrasios and stuff because that was just 4-color good stuff if you really wanted it to be. But overall, I think they did a little bit better when they did Friends Forever and stuff. Those were 2-color ones. They were a little bit more specific, but they could only partner with themselves, which made a lot less combinations, and they weren't like generically good.
Yeah, almost every 2-color commander just does too much, like especially when some of them have text boxes that aren't even on other cards. So like, I think that was just a huge oversight. They got a little too happy with it, and 2-color partners should have either not existed or been nerfed. But we're going to talk about Vile Smasher cards just for funsies here. We've got the Lord of Pain. It's 3 black-red for a 5/5 menace. Your opponents can't gain life, which is great when we're trying to deal damage to them incrementally. And whenever a player casts their first spell each turn, you choose another target player. The Lord of Pain deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to the chosen player.
This is a super cool one. This just came out in Duskmourn, and you want to be getting that group slug effect. This can go in any Vile Smasher deck because it has the same color identity as Vile Smasher, but we often see this in things like Sakashima, which is often paired with Vile Smasher, so you can be getting those damage triggers consistently and to multiple opponents at once.
Yeah, another interesting one is Valley Floodcaller. This is a card that's making waves in CDH. We don't care about that, but it's still pretty good in certain commander decks like this one, because it's 2 and a blue for a 2/2 with flash. You may cast non-creature spells as though they had flash, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, blah, 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 gets +1/+1, untap them. Vile Smasher says first spell each turn, so we really want to trigger it each turn. And now we can give all of our sorceries and our artifacts flash, which is pretty sweet.
Putting onto that is Dark Ritual, black for an instant, add black, black, black. Maybe you're saving up a big spell in your hand and you want to play it at instant speed because of something like it's an X spell, or maybe it's something that you are playing with the flash like Valley Floodcaller. You want to be able to have the mana. I mean, this is not great as your first spell because it's only being able to do 1 damage to an opponent, but you can just be cashing in big spells for that mana later.
Yeah, if you've got a bunch of big spells in your deck, this is going to help power them out, because I think some of these 8-drops can't be reduced, unlike Treasure Cruise. Is actually very similar to the Yuriko thing. We want to cast it and see the game say, this cost 8, but really we paid 1 for it because it delves and it draws 3 cards, even though it says 7 and a blue sorcery. Are Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time mistakes? I would say yes.
I think they're so good that if you are playing the game and you can just put instants and sorceries and your creatures die and they're not tokens, yeah, I think that being able to reduce them by that is so good. Plus, isn't Treasure Cruise banned in a couple formats?
Oh, they're both banned in like everything.
Yeah.
They're both ridiculous.
Yeah, I was going to say just a couple, perhaps.
I think they're both hanging on by a thread in Pioneer right now, and that's probably not going to last that long.
Where do broken cards come to die? Well, it's Commander, actually.
It is Commander. We've got Force of Will up next. 3 blue for an instant. You can pay 1 life and exile a card from your hand to cast it for free, and it counters target spell. We get a 5-drop that doesn't cost mana, so we can easily cast it on someone else's turn. In fact, most likely, that's what's going to happen, and Vile Smasher says, hey, while we're doing that, take 5.
Deflecting Swat is also a good one because you're going to have 2 commanders. 2 and a red for an instant. If you control a commander, you cast it without paying its mana cost. You could choose new targets for target spell or ability. Usually we're not playing these in our decks that can run blue, but one, if you're just playing Vile Smasher with a different commander or partner, then maybe you don't have access to that. But either way, you're going to have 2 commanders if you're partnering it so that you can have this turned on like twice as much, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think any pair of commanders is more likely to turn on all the deflecting spots, all the fierce guardianships, and all the other stuff. Yuriko's always in play, but when you have twice as many commanders, it's hard to keep them both off the field. I think another cool way to take Vile Smasher, though, is in the companion slot with Obosh the Prey Piercer. It's 3 black-red hybrid for a 3/5 and its companion, and your starting deck contains only cards that have odd mana values. Vile Smasher is odd, so that works. And if a source you control with an odd mana value would deal damage to opponent or player, it deals 2x that amount of damage.
That's going to be so much damage, especially if you can just keep pinging damage back and forth and casting stuff really fast. This is an awesome one. And I do just like to talk about companions because I feel like we don't see them as much as I would like because I think they're such a cool addition to a lot of decks.
Yeah, I do wish all of the companions did something in Commander, but I think we only have access to like 7 of them because I know Lutri's banned and Yorion doesn't work. Maybe it's 8. That's just I don't ever want to see another companion because, again, huge design mistake, and Obosh might be the 4th best one. But anyway, they're all pretty tame in Commander, and I think this is more of a cool way to take the deck than like a broken way.
Yeah, I don't think it's particularly broken, but if you want to lean into Vile Smasher's ability and not just for his colors and like his big damage dealing, then you can be using this and then just be casting big 7 drops and stuff and then just dealing double to people. 14's a lot.
And if all this sounds cool, you can actually go buy all these cards, 14 damage dealers and all, on Card Kingdom because they have great prices. I just wanted to mention that. I just wanted to get that off my chest before we move on to our next commander. We talked about 2-color commanders being a mistake, partner with partner. How about a 1-color commander with partner that I think was a pretty big mistake? It's Malcolm, Keen-Eyed Navigator. What is this card? 2 and a blue for a 2/2 with flying. Whenever one or more pirates you control deal damage to your opponents, you create a treasure token for each opponent dealt damage. And it has partner, obviously. Now, this is like a totally tame card. And to me, this looks like half a Magic card. It looks like we did it. It's like, all right, here you go. Here's some pirates. There's not a payoff staple to it. It's got 1 ability, aside from partner and flying, which are, small. But the problem with this, and I think where the mistake is, it just says deal damage. I think this needed to say combat damage because it's when they print a random uncommon, and it starts going infinite with a bunch of things, I think to me that starts setting off the alarm bells of like, maybe this wasn't intended.
When you see CEDH playing 1-color partner where it's just a pirate commander over things that are more value, like 2-color ones, that is when you know that it's going to get nasty real quick. I think the first card that I always think of is Glinthorn Buccaneer when I think of Malcolm. 1 red for a 2/4 with haste. Whenever you discard a card, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. 1 in a red, discard a card, draw a card, only if Glinthorn Buccaneer is attacking. That last part doesn't often matter because it's going to say deal 1 damage to each opponent, and then you're going to be getting treasures off that because Malcolm just says deals damage, not combat damage, not whatever, just whenever they deal damage.
Yeah, it doesn't matter that it says activate only if Glinthorn Buccaneer is attacking. It's like, oh no, I have to risk my Buccaneer. Well, this is an A plus B combo. You just need Malcolm and the Buccaneer because he's a pirate, if that wasn't obvious by the name Buccaneer. When you attack, you pay 1 in a red, discard a card, deals 1/1/1, and you get treasure from that. And that only costs 2 mana to rummage, so you just do it again, and you profit infinite treasures and infinite damage, and you just win the game. Like, A plus B, straight up, you just win. And that's really good. That's really good, but it makes me think, hey, I think Malcolm was supposed to be like a pirate's attack, attack with my 1/1 flyer and then play Malcolm on turn 3 and get a pretty big profit. The deck still does that. If you have Malcolm in your command zone, you can throw a couple 1-drop pirates because you always have access to them. And I think I went to look back because I'm like, now why do they say damage when they almost always say combat damage? And the only card in Commander Masters, the set Malcolm was designed to be played in the most, was Lightning Rig Crew. This is 2 and a red for a 0/5, and it taps to deal 1 to each opponent. And whenever you cast a pirate, you untap it. So I guess they wanted Malcolm to specifically work with Lightning Rig Crew in a cool way to make a bunch of treasures. I don't think it was worth it. And I guess just for funsies, I will point out that Lightning Rig Crew also goes infinite with Malcolm if you add in Dargo plus a sack outlet in your command zone or a Freed from the Reel on Lightning Rig Crew, so that's fun.
I don't think that any of the pirates needed this buff. I feel like pirates are either you're building it to the highest maximum power that it can be because you're looking for A plus B combo, or I guess A plus B plus C plus D if you're going the Dargo Freed from the Real Lightning Rig Crew. Or you're just going, hey, I have some pirates. That's pretty cool. I'm gonna beat you up with some little pirates in the air and also maybe get a couple of treasures from it. I think that is just a funny way to take a creature type. It's just either as high power as possible or as like low power as
It's like,
possible.
yo ho, I'm gonna make a treasure token. It's like, you're actually dead because I tutored up for my Glinthorn Buccaneer, and it's like, oh, okay. I'm always picturing like, what would that look like if a pirate ship rolls up and just shoots infinite cannonballs at you? It's like, oh, my mistake. I didn't know we were playing by those rules.
Well, if I had to guess, I'd probably be dead.
Yeah, I mean, you'd go down pretty quick.
I think so too. The next one that we're going to be talking about is Spyglass Siren, blue for a 1/1 flying. When it enters, create a map token. This can be really good for early game damage if you want to be getting those treasures earlier and you're not going through Glinthorn Buccaneer, or maybe you just want the map token.
I mean, even if Malcolm just said that, like, it would be a pretty strong Pirates commander. If it just said combat damage, we would still just play Spyglass Siren, and we would still play Siren Stormtamer, which is a blue pirate 1/1 flyer, and you pay blue and sacrifice it to counter a spell or ability that targets you or a creature you control. So in the late game, maybe you're getting hit with a Crackle with Power or whatever, and you can either deter that away from you or counter it altogether, or you just protect Malcolm so you can keep making treasures. If you go 1-drop on turn 1, 1-drop, 1-drop turn 2, Malcolm turn 3, that's a pretty common pattern if you stack your deck full of 1-drop pirates. You get 3 treasures when you play Malcolm. That's just like refunds the whole card.
Yeah, honestly, Pirates have gotten so much better in the last couple of years with LCI and all of that stuff.
And Commander Legends.
And Commander Legends. So I'm super happy to see Pirates getting more of an archetype boost, but it didn't need this much of a boost, honestly. The next card is Broadside Bombardiers, 2 and red for a 2/2 menace, haste, boast. Sacrifice another creature or artifact. It deals damage equal to 2 plus the sacrifice permanent's mana value to any target. You can sack something that you just had lying around, deal 2, make a treasure from Malcolm, and then awesome, you have some awesome, like great mana. Or you can just be leaning into that, sacking things that actually have big mana value, so you can be dealing even more damage to creatures so you can get them off the field, players so you can hit them in the face. This is a very versatile card for 3 mana.
Plus, when you hit somebody in the face with Broadside Bombardiers, it's a pirate dealing damage to them, so you get another treasure. Broadside Bombardiers is the real deal. Like, this card is so good. The menace plus haste just takes away a lot of the decision points of, should I put this card in my deck? And it's more like, if you have pirates or any synergy, or you have like sacrifice stuff going on, you kind of just should, because there's usually a player that you can attack and get through. But the fact that it also has removal stapled on means there's really a player you can attack, and they can and leave them with 1 blocker and you'll get through.
Yeah, I feel like Menace, even if it is a 2/2, it's like, oh, do you want to sack your Mana Dork and the 1/1 you just made to block this thing? It's like, probably not. So you're going to be doing that, and then you boast with it, and then just sack something you had lying around, the 1/1 that you're not using from the beginning of the game. You weren't going to chump with it anyways. And then just being able to deal 3 to somebody, that is so much value in such a short span of time.
Yeah, I'm starting to play with this card, and it is absolutely the real deal. So if you were thinking about it, you should probably pick one up. Next up, we have Professional Face Breaker. This is a 2 and a red 2/3 menace. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control hit a player, you get treasure, but this is combat damage. Weird. And then you can sacrifice a treasure and exile the top card of your library, and you can play it this turn. So it is like a backup Malcolm. It also works alongside Malcolm to make twice as many treasures. But now that you're making so many treasures, you can just cash them in for cards. And if you have a bunch of other treasures, you use the rest of the treasures to play the cards that you got from your treasures. It's everything you could ever need.
I feel like sometimes when you're swimming in mana, there's just a point where you're like, what do I do now if you don't have enough card draw built in? And maybe you're not packing your deck full of all of that because you need that mana to be cashing in your map tokens or something else. But Professional Facebreaker giving you the option to make mana and then also make cards appear is really awesome. The next card is another one that leans into that treasure sub-theme. It's Goldspan Dragon, 3 red for a 4/4, flying haste. Whenever it attacks or becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure token. Treasures can tap for 2 instead of just 1. I really like this because it refunds itself immediately. There's always going to be someone who you can swing in with a 4/4 and it's not going to kill it, or it's just going to be a free hit to the face. Or maybe they just jump with a 1/1 if they're at really low life, and you're going to be able to get that mana back. And then all of your treasures from Malcolm are going to be able to tap for double. That is such a powerful effect in Commander.
Yeah, this card more than makes up for the fact that it's not a pirate by just doubling all the output of treasures you have and making some. And if someone thinks that it's a big enough threat to kill it with something, you get another treasure, and you could maybe even respond in some cases where they target it with like lethal scheme. You go, okay, trigger, make a treasure. Now I'll use that mana to counter your spell. It's like definitely pretty funny.
Yeah, I think that being able to refund itself immediately because of the fact that it's like you don't want that many non-pirates in your deck. So you have to be very picky with what you choose for this. But this is really good. I think it just shines here more than most places because having double treasures or something that refunds itself is very nice in a lot of decks because I I feel like treasures are so, you just kind of make them nowadays.
You just get them for free.
But if your commander also says staple them on because when you hit with a 1/1, then that's even better.
So we talked about treasures. Let's move over to foods for our next commander. And the more this commander has existed, the more random 2-card infinites just keep coming out with Peregrine Took. 2 to green for a 2/3. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus an additional food token are created instead, and you can sacrifice 3 foods to draw a card. There's no stopgap here. That was really surprising. Like, this is an uncommon. This wasn't meant to like be a ringer for Modern, but it's just like randomly, it feels devoted Druid-esque where, oh guys, another card came out that combos with Peregrine Took. Like, we did it, we broke it. Like, this card, I just feel like it's just the definition of broken. We're like, was it really supposed to do this? Like, why does it go infinite with Experimental Confectioner? That's not in here because we're talking about him as a commander, but there's other ones too.
I feel like Peregrine Took is one of those cards that you always see no matter what, if you can play green and tokens at the same time. I'm playing it in Roxanne. I've seen it in your Tristani deck back when that was a thing. I'm really surprised that it didn't even say anything like once per turn. I think that would have been a very easy line, or they could have gone the Nadu route, twice per turn.
Yeah, but also like there's also the enabler plus the payoff, which is never like the best design space to hang out in. I just think this one wasn't great. You know, it kind of slipped through the cracks, I think, a little bit. And another reason that it is an absolute unit on the battlefield is that it goes infinite, again, with Nuka-Cola Vending Machine, a 3-mana artifact that says 1 tap, create a food token, and whenever you sacrifice a food, you get a tapped treasure token. Well, that's going to turn into a tapped treasure token and a tapped food token. You need some number of food in play already for this combo, but that's not going to be hard when your commander is Peregrine Took. So as soon as you get to the point where you can sacrifice 3 foods with Peregrine Took's ability, that's a very important last ability. That's where all these combos come from because it's also a free sack outlet. When you sack those 3 foods, you get 3 tapped treasures and 3 tapped foods. So you just draw your entire deck.
There's also another combo with Summoning Station, 7 mana for an artifact. If you tap it, you create a 2/2 colorless pincher token. Whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you can untap Summoning Station, and this is awesome because if you tap it, you make the 2/2, but if Peregrine Took is out, you're also going to be making a food. And if you sack 3 foods, you're going to be able to untap it and make more stuff, and then it's going to be this infinite cycle, which is really awesome.
Yeah, as long as you control 2 foods initially or more, I guess. This just makes infinite 2/2s, and you draw your entire deck. Yes. Wow, I mean, Peregrine Took, what a weird card. You don't see random payoffs that feel like they're draft plants do this much in Commander that often. There's also Academy Manufactor. This is not unique to Peregrine Took. This is just the copy-paste any food clue treasure card because it makes all of them instead of one of them.
Knights of Sweet Revenge is also a all-star in here. 3 and a green for an enchantment. When it enters, you create a food token. Foods can tap to add green. 5 green, and you sack it. Creatures get +X until end of turn. X is the number of foods you control, only at sorcery speed. But being able to staple that big overrun on with the fact that you can also tap your foods for mana is so good. Especially in the token decks where you're going to have just a bunch of little bodies just running around.
Yeah, and if you've ever played against like a Peregrine Took deck, which I know we have every once in a while, even just decks that he's in, it is not hard to end up with a bunch of spare foods. I think foods more than treasure and clues end up just kind of hanging out on the battlefield. So being able to tap them for mana and overrun based on them, it just starts to be like, oh, now they're like really useful.
Well, I mean, you've seen that in like my Roxanne deck, for instance, where it's like no one wants to use the removal on tokens and stuff. It's more of just incidental things. Everyone wants to use it on a big, important permanent. Where it's like, oh, I killed the Ristic Study. I killed, their Soul Ring turn 1. No one wants to be using it on the food, but that food might be the way. 1 extra food might be the difference between life and death for a player.
Yeah, I mean, if Peregrine Took's in play, just kill the Peregrine Took. It's one of those cards that is a little exhausting to play against because when they play it, I have to ask, like, are you going to be, like, do you have infinite combos in there? If you don't answer me, I'm going to kill Peregrine Took immediately because I'm just going to assume there is. And if you say there is, which is totally reasonable, I still have to kill it immediately. It's just like this weird sub-game of, like, how much of a problem is that? Because you could go all the way to the moon with it.
I like there was no subtext there. It was just, are you playing Peregrine Took? If you don't answer, I will kill him immediately.
Yeah, I like it. Sounds very threatening when I say it like that. What's another Peregrine Took card?
The next card is Parallel Lives, 3 and a green for an enchantment. If an effect would create one or more tokens under your control, creates that twice that many instead. I mean, this is such a staple token card to begin with, but when you are going to be making tokens intentionally, tokens accidentally with Peregrine Took, and then making double that, you're just going to snowball your way to victory.
Yeah, I think this makes it so trivial to actually activate or Peregrine's last ability of like, oh, 3 foods is a lot. It's like, no, it's not even a lot, I think. And with Parallel Lives, it's going to be whatever you cast a spell, draw a card. That's basically what this is going to amount to be. It is very, very strong. Enough about Parallel Lives, because everybody knows about that card. One card I thought was really funny with Peregrine Took specifically is Chatterstorm. It's 1 and a green for sorcery, and you create a 1/1 squirrel token, but it has Storm. And just the way this card plays out is perfect with Peregrine Took, because Peregrine Took says if you would create 1 or more tokens. If you create 50 squirrels, you get 50 squirrels and 1 food. If you create 1 squirrel 50 times that are all separate spells resolving or copies resolving, you'll get 50 foods. That's like super funny. Even just a storm count of 3 kind of takes this to the next level.
Yeah, the 50 instances of 1 or even 3 instances of 1. For 1 and a green, too, it's like, would you pay 1 and a green for 3 squirrels and 3 foods?
Yes.
Yes, I would. I would draw a card and get 3 1/1s for 2 mana.
Yeah, Chatterstorm is one of those mediocre cards that only needs a little bit of something to just push it way over the edge and make it awesome. So I like shouting out when that's possible.
I think Bootlegger Stash is also an interesting one in here because we often think of this card as somewhat unplayable because of its high mana cost and the fact that it's in green, 5 and a green for an artifact. Lands you control have tap to create a treasure token, and we often think of this as unplayable because green doesn't usually need token or treasure based ramp because you can be ramping with lands instead. But in this, it says tap your land, make a treasure, and also make a food, which just doubles the value of this. I think the 6 mana is not that tough to get to either.
Yeah, it's funny. This card is unplayable or unusable in most decks because it's, wow, instead of tapping my lands for mana, I can tap my lands for mana. That's not worth paying 6 for in most cases. But now when it says every 3 lands you tap for mana, you draw a card, you're triggering nonstop artifact ETBs. If you have Academy Manufactor, the game feels over. And it just leads to this like snowball of like, hey, do you not know how scary this is? If you leave it in play, you're done.
Now, I don't think this card is banned for Commander worthy like when it was first came out,
Oh my
maybe.
God.
But I think that this is very good in certain decks, including Peregrine Took.
Yeah, Bootlegger Stash, as it turns out, maybe the Nitpicking Nerd said this. Who's to say? Not a bannable Magic card. Next up, we're going to go to Derevi, Imperial Tactician, a flashback mistake. This is blue, white, green for a 2/3 flyer. When it enters and when a creature you control hits a player, you can untap or tap target permanent. Now, I guess I will note this is combat damage because everything says combat damage. It also has another ability, 1 green, white, blue, : put it onto the battlefield from the command zone. Could you guess where the mistake falls here? Circumventing commander attacks or even casting at all. This ability is not counterable by like a regular counterspell. So it's just really weird that they did that. I know they were experimenting early. This is very early in the commander specific product. But yeah, they never went back to this because it's dumb.
It's just the instant speed part, too. It's like, oh, if I have the end step win because I can tap and untap and fiddle with a bunch of permanents, too. This is just, there are so many little points of this where it's like, hey, that can make it a little bit better, and you didn't. And it's not a cast, and it's instant speed, and it's only 4 mana. The mana cost of this is just irrelevant because who cares about commander attacks at a certain point, and that's what makes just playing commanders, whether it's worth it or not. Well, it's always going to be worth it because it's always going to be 4 in here. I think one of the most interesting ads that have come out lately for this deck is Delny's Streetwise Tactician. 2 and a white for a 2/2. Creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. Well, that's very convenient because Derevi is a 2-power creature with 3 toughness. If an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, it triggers an additional time. So you could get additional taps or untaps if you really want. And especially when it comes and enters, if you have any haste enablers or anything like that, you can be getting up to 4 taps or untaps per turn.
Yeah, even if you're hitting with large creatures for some reason, the creature that's triggering off of the combat damage is Derevi, so they just get the double taps and untaps and stuff like that. I think Delny's pretty sweet in this deck. I love it, and it definitely complements the design mistake. It's so weird that it's 4 mana put it into play, because I feel like that the line of text, put it onto the battlefield from the command zone, is potentially usable on something. If it was like a really expensive commander and the cost you pay was equal to like it had to die twice for you to ever want to do that. That could be cool, but obviously 4 mana on a 3 mana commander is like that's never gonna be fair.
Yeah, maybe if there were like more hoops to jump through, like how Phage is like, hey, you have to get into the graveyard from the command zone and you can't play it first to be able to be casting it for that much. Maybe if you had some sort of weird hoop to jump through first, that would be a usable design space. But 4 mana is so low, maybe it's like 7 mana, put it onto the battlefield. Maybe that's a little bit better.
And you know what? This feels like another Malcolm situation where it always feels like oh, on this card we're gonna put this really strong ability, so we're gonna tone back the regular card. Except not really, because this card still goes infinite with a bunch of stuff. So it's not even like Derevi is half a magic card with a cool command zone or command attacks nullifying ability. It's still just kind of busted and combos with a bunch of stuff. One of the cards you're gonna see in those Derevi combos is Bloom Tender. It's 1 and a green for a 1/1, and it taps for each color among permanents you control. So this is a 1 card, 1 permanent that will tap for multiple mana, which I'm sure could never be abused in any way, right?
With things like Emil the Blessed, 2 white for a 4/4, 3 mana is a very convenient amount of mana to be paying for. Exile another target creature you control, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Whenever another creature you control enters, you can pay green or white hybrid. If you do, put a 1/1 counter on it. If it's a unicorn, put 2 1/1 counters on it. You're going to be flickering Derevi and getting those untap and tapping target permanent over and over, being able to create a ton of mana or enters the battlefield triggers with a bunch of things, whether you're doing that with intruder alarm type things, Bloom Tender, etc.
Yeah, a lot of these commanders have to do with mana because cheating mana is very, very good. So when you put ETB make 3 mana on something, you know that there's a huge problem. And obviously Derevi requires a few extra steps, but this is just one of the reasons it's so strong. You're going to see things in this deck like Finale of Devastation. If you need to find any of the above pieces, you play X green sorcery, search your library and or graveyard for a creature card that costs X or less and put it onto the battlefield. And if you have 1,000,000 mana, all your guys get +X and gain haste until end of turn. Just like one of the quintessential toolbox cards. I feel like Finale of Devastation is always your best creature, even if that creature has died already.
Yeah, and being able to staple on, I don't know, just punch for 1,000,000 if you have enough mana. Being able to take it from your graveyard to the battlefield too. The flexibility of that plus Derevi being able to be making so much mana is just such a nasty combo overall.
Well, yeah, because a lot of decks will just love the toolbox aspect, but Derevi specifically is one of the commanders that wants to make infinite mana and can do it a bunch of different ways. So even if you already enabled and you got your toolbox stuff in play, here you go. This is your win con.
I feel like it's harder not to make infinite mana with Derevi because there are so many guides out there or just stable pieces that are like, wait, that goes infinite. And oh no, that's actually too good for this deck. Or you could go the tapping route. That's like Winter Orb, 2 mana for an artifact. As long as it's untapped, players can't untap more than 1 land during their untapped steps. So you can keep it tapped for the rest of everyone's stuff and then untap it whenever it suits you the best.
Yeah, it's so funny that those old artifacts work this way. But even if they didn't, and it was symmetrical for you, if your Derevi didn't tap it or something, Derevi just, your creatures all untap normally, and you just hit people with all your evasive dummies and your 1/1s and your dorks and stuff while they can't even play Magic, and now you just get to untap your lands manually. So even if you can't end step break symmetry, tap it, whatever, you're still going to break symmetry all day long. And it is unfortunate that Winter Orb is so good in like 10 really strong commander decks, because there's like the Derevi decks that are already really good. I'll be scared if I sit down across from a Derevi, but then I have to be like, are you playing Winter Orb? Is this a different subgame than we're playing?
Now, if you're playing any of these cards, I will have to kill your commander immediately, BZ says for every commander
Is it
that's
the
on
buzzy
this.
politics?
It's the buzzy politics. Are you playing Winter Orb? Are you playing infinite combos? Are you?
I don't know.
That is the rule 0 when we sit down with him. The next card is another one that's going to be great in any deck, but especially this one because you can get double, triple, maybe even quadruple triggers off of it. The One Ring, 4 mana for an indestructible artifact. When the One Ring enters, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. Beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on it, and if you tap it, you put a burden counter on it, then draw a card for each burden counter on it. But if you can untap it multiple times, get a bunch of cards, that's basically you win on a stick.
I think this card is broken. I think this card was a design mistake. And it's already banned in Modern now. And honestly, if this card got banned in Commander in 3 years, I would not even bat an eyelash at this, because this card is very, very strong. So just the fact that we have a commander, one of the few commanders I think that can take serious extra advantage of this, it turns it from, oh no, the One Ring's in play, now they have protection from everything. We're really going to have to band together, guys, to, oh, they played the One Ring, I'll just quit. Because if you play the One Ring and you have 5 creatures that just hit me immediately, you draw 1 card, then 2 cards, then 3 cards, then 4 cards, then 5 cards, then 6 cards immediately. I'm just going to scoop to that, especially when you're going to have, infinite stuff in your deck. I mean, like, it just kind of feels almost like a 1-2 punch. You're just done.
Because he's just like, yeah, I think I'm just going to head out right now. I think I'm pretty good.
They just drew 20 cards for 4 mana. I'm done.
The next card is going to be if you want to go the tap untap route, but you don't want to be so brutal about it, or you don't want to be playing the One Ring. Captain Sisay, 2 white green for a 2/2. If you tap her, you search your library for a legendary card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Yes, you can go the find the One Ring, or you can find a bunch of legends that just have cool tap untap abilities within the Bant color scheme.
Yeah, everything from the higher end, One Ring, Guy's Cradle, etc., to the lower end of, like, I guess Emil's also on the higher end, to, like, I really want to get Urza's Ruinous Blast because I need a board wipe. That's good, honest fun. And if you want to have good, honest fun, you better be building your decks through Moxfield. They have a really great playtest function, actually. So if you're looking to make those last cuts or adds for your deck, Moxfield is a really intuitive and helpful and useful and doesn't look disgusting playtest function that lets you plan out the first 5 turns, figure out what cards are dead in your opening hands.
I love goldfishing on Moxfield, and I love the fact that if I am curious about what other people are building and throwing into their decks, then I can actually look at lists that are suggested to me on the bottom so that I can see, ooh, well, I never even considered this card. Let's see how it works, and then check it out and put it into my own deck.
All right, so next we have to go to what I think is, like, the poster child for this episode. Like, one of the most broken cards I've ever seen. It just doesn't do anything as advertised, and it's just dumb. It's Tivit, Seller of Secrets. Tivit is 3 white, blue, black for a 6/6 with flying and ward 3, and has Council's Dilemma. Ooh, whenever Tivit enters or deals combat damage to a player, starting with you, each player votes for evidence or bribery. For each evidence vote, you get an investigate, which is a clue, and for each bribery vote, you get a treasure. And while voting, you may vote an additional time. This, to everyone who read it the first time, is like, oh, they finally made a voting commander. This is politics and voting and oh boy, but it just fails in every front and is somehow broken in, like, every other possible way. So this, first of all, did not succeed as a voting commander because that's not how this card is played for the most part. This is a card that makes treasures on ETB at least 2 every time and has a bunch of other words on it, including Ward 3, which is also a mistake. I think this comes from the early time of Ward when they're sort of developing and figuring out and testing the waters of, like, can we put Ward 3 on something? Can we put Ward 4 on something? Turns out those 2 things are, like, very close to hexproofy, and they're not very fun. So that did not end up being good. And this falls into, I genuinely think this falls into a similar design space as Dockside, where it's like when you start making a bunch of treasures on ETB and you either don't cost a lot of mana or do a bunch of other crap, that's not a good place to be.
The big wards back in the day, Ward 3 on this, Ward 8 on Octavia and stuff. No, I'm not paying 4 for, a Swords to Plowshares. That feels really bad. And then just overall, this being able to, you could flicker it, getting all those treasures. It doesn't matter what your opponents think or what they say, because you're going to be getting those treasures. Ooh, you know what I can do again? Make more, because my deck is built to make that way. And the 6 mana that you have on Tivit isn't as much of a problem as you'd really think. And the higher mana commanders, you're like, oh, well, at least they won't be powering those out immediately. Tivit hits the field so surprisingly fast.
Because the decks can just turbo him out without putting any mind to anything else. And the reason I said that this is not actually a voting commander is because the votes are locked. The choices are too good. So when, like, you can't afford as the opponent of a Tivit player to give them anything other than a clue. So, ooh, this is the voting commander. When you play Tivit, it makes 2 treasures and 3 clues. That's literally all it ever does because no one's going to vote any different way. So it's just like, what a total miss on the voting front. What a total miss on the ward. What a total miss on, this is a 6 mana card that makes 6 permanents and lets you follow it up with something. It makes treasures on ETB in multiples. Wow, man.
But don't also just think about it. It also is a 4-hit kill for commander damage.
Yes, it's also, and it also deals combat damage to make all of this stuff again, which leads us to one of the other very, very strong cards with Tivit. I'm just complaining about the design mistake that is Tivit. Tivit players, I got nothing against you. Tivit's cool. He's really strong. But he's undeniably just a complete mistake. He's such a mess as a card. The card you're going to see with him most, since he does deal combat damage to make all that crap, is Time Sieve. Blue-black artifact, tap, sacrifice 5 artifacts, take an extra turn after this one. Can you think of a way, Mia, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, can you think of a way in a Tivit deck to make 5 artifacts every turn for free?
What if he just entered or hit somebody because
Oh
he's
my-
a 6'6"
Whoa.
gigantic man?
We did it.
We did it. We broke time sieve,
We broke
everyone.
Tivit.
But time sieve is just one of those things where it's like, if you can't exile this immediately, they're going to find ways to recur it because it's their win con. Oh, I could just take infinite turns because I'll just start smacking you guys or flickering him, and then I just get another turn after this. That's at that point, that I think that's one of the cards where if I see it, I'll be like, are you playing time sieve? No? Okay, good. Well, and if you are, well, I'll just maybe quit, or I'll pull out something so spicy that it doesn't matter if it's budget, because Tivit, time sieve, and then some sort of ritual or something, that's a win very easily.
Yeah, I mean, it could even just be Tivit, use my 2 treasures, cast Time Sieve, and now I have 3 clues plus 2 artifacts I played earlier in the game, and I just start the infinite chain. And it's tough to come out from. There's also things like, well, we're going to get into why the Dockside Extortionist side of this card is not very good design space, because we have things like Displacer Kitten, 3 to blue, 2/2. When you cast a non-creature spell, you flicker a non-land permanent you control. That's totally reasonable text. I think Displacer Kitten is very good, but I'm not saying that this card is a mistake or that every card here is a mistake. When you start getting the mistakes is putting cards that make a bunch of treasures and do a bunch of other stuff, to where now every time you flicker Tivit, you get a 2 mana refund. And it's not 2 mana to your mana pool. It can stay around for future phases.
I think just being able to flicker something so many times, getting all those things, and just putting all of those little 1 mana, I do a thing, and then oops, I guess I'm getting more treasures, I guess I'll just keep doing that, is so nasty. Soul Herder is another one where it's 1 blue white for a 1/1. When it's exiled from the battlefield, you put a 1/1 counter on it. Not the important part. At the beginning of your end step, you can exile another target creature you control, return to the battlefield. That's going to be Tivit. That's going to be 2 treasures, 3 clues, unless you can convince someone to give you otherwise. And then that's going to be 5 artifact ETBs or 5 token, creations and stuff. That's going to be giving you triggers off things like your Nadier's Nightblade if you're playing that, or Mirkwood Bats, or things that sacrifice it too.
Yeah, and this is a card you can play before Tivit, to where you can resolve Tivit, maybe with counterspell backup off the treasures or something, if they try to hurt Soul Herder, you know what I mean. And then you get, an immediate flicker, and that's just great for you. You also have things like, since you're making a bunch of stuff, why not get rid of it for value? We have Marionette Apprentice, 1 in a black, 1/2, fabricate 1. When your creatures or artifacts die, each opponent loses 1 life. Just a way to sort of let you focus all the way on Tivit, which is the strongest part of your deck. You focus all in on flickering him and moving around with him and attacking him and getting that stuff. And all you have to do is use that stuff, and then you can win.
I mean, we all know that being able to sack treasures is so easy, whether you're playing the spells in your hand or you're just sacking the clues that you made for extra damage. That is just the pivotal part of the deck. If you need those cards, it's going to be so easy to get them with Tivit. And then there are cards that have come out recently, like Forensic Gadgeteer. When you cast artifact spells, you investigate. There are so many cheap artifacts, baubles, for instance, that you're just going to be able to chain back and forth. And then also activate abilities cost 1 less to activate. It can't be reduced less than 1, but if you're going to be able to just every time Tivit enters or deals combat damage, get 2 cards off of it and 4 artifact sacks, that's going to be so good.
And so Tivit players know, based on how Tivit works and how it's not an actual vote, and it's make 3 clues, 2 treasures every time, or else you're in serious danger. They know that. And so they get to stack their deck full of a bunch of like rituals and fast mana to cheat out Tivit, because now that you have all this extra mana with nothing to do with, you can start drawing cards off of the clues players are forced to give you. And Forensic Gadgeteer powers that up. It makes them twice as easy to crack. And it means that if you are humming along and Tivit's been in play for a turn or two, you're probably going to clinch the win.
I mean, there are also so many good things to be making treasures with in the Esper colors, whether you're doing like Grim Hireling, or you're doing Flicker shenanigans with things like Displacer Kit, or you even just have Smothering Tithe out. That's just already 3 nasty cards out of the 99 that you can be playing.
Or you throw in Academy Manufactor, and then you really find out how much of a non-vote Tivit offers.
I think it'll be real fast.
It's like, you guys can choose if you want. You get to choose, what is it, bribery or tax evasion or something like that. You get to choose those just for fun, but I'll still make all 3. It's also Krark Clan Ironworks. This is the real killer, I think, too. 4 mana artifact, sacrifice an artifact, make colorless. Now you can sacrifice a treasure to pay for a clue, which just fuels your game plan. And now if you can do that enough times, find enough ways to flicker him, you're not infinite, but you are taking a bunch of game actions, which I always condone.
Hey guys, we broke KCI. That's pretty cool, right?
We finally found a deck that KCI is good in. You got to play a bunch of artifacts. I think Tivit, you don't even necessarily have to play like 40 artifacts in your deck to have KCI be good, which is definitely unique.
Yeah, because you're just going to be making 5 artifacts every single time he comes in or deals combat damage, because very few times are there going to be enough blockers where you're not going to be able to swing at someone for that 6/6 flying combat damage. There's also capital punishment if you want to go in the voting route. 4 black for a sorcery. Starting with you, each player votes for death or taxes. Each opponent sacks a creature of their choice for each death vote and discards a card for each taxes vote. This is a bit of a more fair way to play Divot if you don't want to be going I chain all my artifacts together and chain all these treasures and then just win on the spot because I take infinite turns. You can be leaning into the voting commander space like they wanted you to begin with.
We wanted to at least call out this tiny sliver of Tivit decks that are actually hinging on voting, but I think one of the issues of Tivit is that he's very, very loud. So I'm not going to experience a lot of you get to vote a second time, because I'm really worried about that you just made 6 clues and 4 treasures just from your commander. Also, does ward 3, it's like really hard to kill. But you know what? Shout outs capital punishment for those that are honestly trying to swing the vote with Tivit. And now we couldn't have a broken commanders list without looking at least one 5-color Wooburg commander. Our entry this time is Go Shintai of Life's Origin. 3 green for a 3/4 enchantment creature. You can pay Wooburg and tap it to return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. But what this actually is a shrine. And whenever Go Shintai of Life's Origin or another non-token shrine you control enters, you get a 1/1 colorless shrine enchantment creature token. There's just a lot going on here, and I don't think that this entire card is like one big glaring mistake and oh my god, this card is so busted and it's unbeatable. But I do think it's like randomly really good when shrines are very, very janky, and I feel like this card's power level has brought all the shrines up to it, and it feels a little weird. I do think it's at least uncommon and a little bizarre that it triggers on itself. There are a couple creatures that already exist that do that, namely like allies or certain things where the initial trigger is underpowered. This one was just confusing to me.
Yeah, I think that when they wanted to give a commander to something that has a little bit less support like shrines, they could have done it in a very easy way. And I'm not even that nervous about looking at that first part or that second part where it's like another non-token shrine enters or it, because that is rare that things trigger itself. But I'm looking at that first part where it's like you can just build 5-color Wooburg good stuff enchantment decks and then just be able to recur them to the battlefield from the graveyard just for the low cost of Wooburg. I think that's pretty rare to see, and that makes it fall way more into that good stuff category.
Yeah, they just stapled on that could just be the card, right? 3 green, 3/4, pay 5 reanimated enchantment, and then they're like, here's some shrine stuff. I don't know if I love it. We're not going to nitpick it too much, but we are going to talk about the deck because I do think there's some kind of oversight happened somewhere. But let's talk about the cool version of the deck with shrines. We have Sanctum of All. It's Wooburg for an enchantment shrine. At the beginning of your upkeep, you search your library and or graveyard for a shrine and just put it into play. And if you search your library this way, shuffle. And if an ability of another shrine you control triggers while you control 6 or more shrines, that ability triggers an additional time. That's super cool. You play Go Shintai, you get a 2nd shrine. Then you play Sanctum of All, which is your 3rd shrine, and you get a 4th shrine. The next turn, you get a 5th shrine, which triggers Go Shintai, and now you have 6 shrines.
I mean, it's really nice to be able to see synergistic pieces in this where you can also play and just take advantage of all of those Wooburg colors. I feel like shrines outside of shrine decks are very rarely seen, or maybe if you see one where it's like, oh, it maybe deals a little bit of damage around and you want that extra like 1 ping of damage to like just actually synergize with your commander. But being able to have a Wooburg shrine that's like, okay, shrine, trigger is actually just one of the pieces that holds this deck together.
Yeah, I think shrines are really cool in general because they're just so janky. They're literally the entire shrine archetype is just you wait till I untap, and almost none of them do anything to affect the board.
Vanilla plus.
Yeah, they're all just like, oh, I'm going to get some mana later, and I'll draw a card, and I'll tap your creature. They're so cool. I love shrines. I think Go Shintai does give shrines a bad name, but it's cool that there's a dedicated shrine commander.
I think it's also pretty interesting because when we think of Go Shintai, there are a surprising amount of decks that I see that are not only Go Shintai shrine decks, they're Go Shintai shrine plus gate decks now too.
Oh, because you might as well throw in 25 scripted tap lands and then have mazes in?
There are so many games where it is, this is my Go Shintai deck, and then I have seen this is my mazes end win. It's like it's 1-2 at this point. I feel like I haven't seen a Go Shintai win in a very long time that hasn't been some sort of mazes end win.
That's so weird. I never even knew that. I guess it makes sense because We love our build-arounds. Why not squeeze 2 together at once? There's also Sanctum of Calm Waters, 1 in a blue enchantment shrine. At the beginning of your first main phase, you can draw X, where X is the number of shrines you control, but you also discard 1 card every time. So the more shrines you get, the more this turns into actual card advantage. And it's like, who needs Rhystic Study when I can just play 4 shrines and then play Sanctum, and the next turn on my upkeep, draw 7, discard 1. Shrines are so charming.
Yeah, why would you be playing Rhystic Study and the thing that can get back enchantments from the graveyard when you could just be playing Sanctum? I do love that, though. I think it's very, very cute. The fact that you can just cobble together a real shrine deck out of everything that Goshentai is doing. There's also Honden of Infinite Rage, 2 in a red for an enchantment shrine. At the beginning of your upkeep, it deals damage to any target equal to the number of shrines you control. This can be as little as 1 if you only have him out, or as many as 10 billion and a half, depending on how many times you can flicker Goshentai.
Yeah, I'm also kind of thinking, and this feels like you could almost go, instead of the Gates sub-theme, you could do like an upkeep sub-theme now, because we have like 6 Obekas, there's the Doctor, there's Paradox Haze. Maybe you just turn into the upkeep deck, and some of those are enchantments.
Maybe. I mean, you definitely have the ability to do that with all of this. And I feel like just introducing things like Monarch into the game is going to be so powerful with the courts and stuff, where you can just also be triggering those and getting them back with your commander.
Yeah, or you could do what I think is inevitable in the Goshentai decks that I think maybe makes it a little less appealing to me personally, not objectively, but Entity Tracker is up next. This is a good card. It's 2 in a blue for a 2/3 flash, and whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, you draw a card. Now this card just goes in the Goshentai decks, the Shrine decks anyway, but this could be partially how you bleed into, like, what's the difference between this and Enchantress, or could you just play Enchantress? Like, partially, kind of, but anyway, when you make shrines, you go, okay, the shrine enters, I draw a card, because it just says when it enters. Even if you reanimate it with the Goshentai of Life's Origin. So that's, boom, draw a card. But it also makes a shrine, which is an enchantment token. So you draw another card. So this is just super powered.
It makes me wonder if it actually needed that line of text, because there are more and more token enchantments that we see coming along every single time a new set comes out, whether that be the glimmer tokens of Duskmourn, or we see, you know, the enchantment tokens that Onyxia brings out because they're coming back, or we see things like the monstrous roll tokens. There are so many token types or just easy to make enchantments entering the battlefield that should we make that into cast and not just when an enchantment you control enters? I think that it's a little bit easy to trigger nowadays.
Yeah, and the doubling up with the Goshentai of Life's Origin with the extra shrine tokens, it just makes it even more absurd. I don't even know why the tokens have to be enchantments. It definitely just gives that added layer of, this could be really good with a handful of things that check Constellation. And it's probably more flavor than function, I guess.
Probably. I mean, it was probably one of those things where they're not going to errata it because I don't think it's that good enough to errata. But it's good enough where it's like all of these Enchantress payoffs, especially in Wooburg, will get you that value that you need to push the deck from janky to, like, I'm not going to say over the top, but better than expected. The next card is a card that really plays into that enchantment kind of sub-theme. It's Sanctum Weaver, 1 in a green for a 0/2 enchantment creature. If you tap it, you get X mana of any one color where X is the number of enchantments you control, whether that be shrines, tokens, whatever. And Goshentai is going to be making a ton of those. So this is going to be able to tap for a ton of mana.
Yeah, yet another payoff for do the thing, get twice as much of the something. And Goshentai definitely feels like one of those commanders that just is like, if you like it, double it. It feels very double-y, right? I mean, you double the number of shrines, so after you play Goshentai, your shrine count doubles.
Yeah, it's definitely doubly, and I do love the fact that this will always trigger itself. So bare minimum, it's always 1 in a green, tap it for a mana of any color. And then if you just happen to be playing your deck with things like Utopia Sprawl or anything else that you are going to be running in here, you will just be getting extra mana from it.
Yeah, the floor is pretty high on Sanctum Weaver. I also like this absolute jank, Second Chance, 2 in a blue for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 5 or less life, sacrifice Second Chance and take an extra turn after this one. If you are somehow at 5 or less, this goes infinite, because Goshentai can just reanimate this every turn and give you infinite turns, which I don't know how you lose with infinite turns and draw your whole deck and extra mana laying around every turn. But that is like so funny. I can't think of a ton of enchantments that you could just pay all your life into. Maybe like Necropotence or something.
Yeah, I feel like there's a few, even if you're not paying it into enchantments, it's just like, I don't know, just I'll pay a bunch of life or I'll take the damage and stuff. Oh, I'm sitting at 4. That's kind of crazy because I have this and it's going to kill us.
Yeah,
you guys.
You take out a gotcha, you take out a Boros Charm and you put in a Second Chance and you just go, you've already got me, so now I've got you.
Well, it's also like with gotchas, it's like, I'm not surprising you with this one. It's like, no, this one is actually synergistic to my deck because I can also play enchantments.
And I don't think Second Chance is that good, and I don't think it's like a tangible percentage of Goshintai decks, but the next card just so happens to work pretty well with it if you were to build a Second Chance Kindred deck, because Zur the Enchanter is 1 blue, black, white for a 1/4 flyer, and when he attacks, you can search for an enchantment that costs 3 or less and put it straight into play. So that could be Second Chance. Most likely it's a really good shrine. And also, maybe you get into that Enchantress and maybe you just get a Sithis or a Sanctum Weaver or a Rhystic Study.
I mean, this is where it bleeds into, is this going to be a Shrine Commander or is this going to be a 5-color good stuff enchantment deck? Because, as we all know, most enchantment and enchantress types are in the Selesnya Plus, but if you can be playing Rhystic Study and stuff in there too, that's just going to put your deck over the top.
And apparently, everyone who plays Goshintai is actually going to get Guild Summit because they want to pay off all their gates that they have in play.
I don't know. That's what I've been seeing lately.
I think that's true. I remember seeing that too. If you play Goshintai and Maze's End, let us know how that is for you. And if you want to see more Nitpicking Nerds, specifically more Nitpicking Nerds telling you which cards are most worth buying in January, check it out right here before you miss out.